There are some really ugly and poorly built cars on the road. Some are gone forever, and some just stand out in the crowd. Here are 15 of the world's worst cars ever built. Now, the years range from the 1950s to present day, and some you may have heard of, some maybe not, but you want to sit back and enjoy this list of the 15 worst cars made of all time. Welcome back to Car Coach Reports. I'm Lauren Fix. If this is your first time here, we give you more than car reviews and first looks of new vehicles. We give you car smarts because knowledge is power. Subscribe and click that little bell for notifications so you don't miss anything. Let's get to the list, and this is in no particular order. Make sure to add your worst cars in the comments down below, and then we can compare notes. The 2004 Chevy SSR, GM's retro creation, hot rodding it all the way right to the assembly line. According to some, it was plain heavy, underpowered, and lazy. Definitely not what America would consider a hot rod. This truck was very polarizing and did not sell well. Please leave the hot rodding to the aftermarket. The 2001 Pontiac Aztek. Now, most people disliked it because its design and it looked unusual and looked strange, like a three-eyed monster. It was supposed to be a family vehicle. The goal was to create a futuristic car that would set the bar for other auto manufacturers to match. Well, unfortunately, due to the many designers who worked on the Aztek, the car was left half-baked. The Aztek is one of the most devastating failures in the automotive industry. They put the best of their designers on the project. Rumor was they were all fired after consumer and media feedback. The Chrysler PT Cruiser and the Convertible. Now, this was Chrysler's attempt on creating a hot rod. The late 90s was a difficult time for Chrysler, and it was in partnership with Mercedes, and the German firm wanted to make cuts in order to bring Chrysler back into profitability. Now, the PT Cruiser, and PT was supposed to stand for personal transport, was a concept, and its translation to reality was not very successful. There was a taller roof, larger windows, and you could actually see out of it, but the overall design was very upright, and the PT Cruiser was not what consumers expected. In the US, Chrysler classified the car as a truck in an effort to bring the average emissions for corporate average fuel economy and its commercial fleet down. However, it decided to add on a convertible to the lineup. Probably had some good intentions, but the execution was sad at best. 1985 Yugo GV. The creator of the Bricklin also created the Yugo GV. Simply put, the engines gave up. The electrical system would fry, and eventually something would inevitably fall off. Dubbed the Mona Lisa of bad cars, the Yugo should probably just have been given up before it even started, right after its 5-mile gas tank that was not very practical. The car had the vision of offering the cheapest automobile in the United States. Unfortunately, it was also the worst, and the car was imported from Yugoslavia and sold in the United States for $4,000. In reality, it's worth around a tenth of that at that price. The interior was filled with too much plastic, and it was supposed to be cheaper, and we understood that. When an automaker fails in the luxury department, they make up that in performance sometimes. But Yugo failed in all aspects, and the car was blessed with a harsh and jarring driving experience, which made it even worse. Terrible steering, terrible handling, and it begs the question, Yugo or no go? I guess consumers answered that question. The Yugo is the butt of many jokes today. The 1978 AMC Pacer, produced between 1975 and 1979, and the company sold in 1980. It was 37% glass and came in a 2-door hatchback or a 2-door station wagon. And the Pacer's creator was the same person that came up with the idea for the Gremlin. And it was promoted by AMC as the first wide small car. Production only lasted a few years for this little wide small car, and consumers called it a fishbowl, as the rounded glass just made the car plain ugly. 1966 Peel Trident. Now, the Trident was built on the Isle of Man in the 1960s. It was the world's smallest car, measuring 4 feet and 2 inches in length. And the Trident was an example of the futuristic bubble car like you would see in the Jetsons or in a cartoon. And it offered either 2 seats or 1 seat with a detachable shopping basket, and of course, it was a clear bubble top, which made it look like a UFO. It's cute for a museum at best. The Chevrolet Citation. According to the dictionary, it means exemplary conduct. Well, unfortunately, the Chevrolet Citation turned out to be pretty much the exact opposite of that. Clearly, the car suffered from being a rush job to such a degree that it eventually became its downfall. The Citation's end was eventually brought on by the US government's decision to file a lawsuit against General Motors to tackle a tsunami of complaints filed by various car owners. Now, the car was raved about by all the media, not me, and seemed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, at least in the world of automobiles. However, it later turned out that GM had duped car magazines at that time. They were all given specifically modified versions of the car in which a serious torque steer had been taken out. By the third year, sales dropped, and by 1985, the gig was up and the car was off the market. The Ford Pinto. The Pinto had a tendency to burst into flames on rear-end collisions. Though the car really wasn't as bad as many on the list, it did have some issues, but stayed in production until 1980. There were over 3 million produced over its lifespan. Unfortunately, 1.5 million were subject to a recall in 1977 due to the fuel system being defective. The Pinto was marketed two ways. One was a 3-door hatchback and one was a 3-door station wagon. Surprisingly, these are collectibles. The 1970 AMC Gremlin. Long in the front and short in the back, the Gremlin was an odd-looking beast with a heavy 6-cylinder engine with choppy handling because of the lack of suspension in the back. It was AMC's attempt to create a subcompact car before Ford and GM had a chance, and the Gremlin came in a 2-seater or a 4-seater design. Love them or hate them, the Gremlins were produced until 1978, and folks still think of them as worth preserving, and you certainly don't see many of them today, but there are collectors that have them. The commercial said, "Hey lady, where's the back half of your car?" The Ford Edsel. There were 18 different versions of the Ford Edsel, starting in 1957, right in the beginning of the recession, and the Edsel was supposed to be everything America was looking for, but seemed to be doomed from the beginning. Consumers and critics cited the Edsel as just plain ugly and overpriced, and unfortunately, production only lasted for 2 years, but then it stopped. Back when they were made, they were a huge disappointment, but presently, they can fetch thousands of dollars for collectors. The 1957 King Midget Model 3. This little box of a car had a 9-horsepower motor and was known as a utility vehicle. Eventually, the government safety standards won, stopping the production of the Midget mini models. These mini cars were first sold in a kit, complete with chassis, axles, springs, steering assembly, and an instruction manual and patterns for sheet metal, all for under $300. But by the end of the era, the mini cars were sold as completely assembled cars by the Midget Motor Corporation, and in later dates, they started looking like Jeeps. The Cadillac Cimarron. Now, the Cimarron was a perfect example of a good-looking car that's best to be avoided. The car featured an exotic styling that gave it an impressive, sophisticated, and luxury look. But that's the farthest of good things on this vehicle. Its build quality meant that it couldn't go very far, and among the negative sides of the Cimarron, it was a snail-like pace. Introduction in 1981, the car sold at a huge price of $12,131, and the Cimarron marked the beginning of the fall for Cadillac, causing damage to the company that may not have been recovered from this day. 1957 to 1991 Trabant. Germany is well known for some of the best automobiles in the world, with one exception, the Trabant. This one was a disaster on wheels. Dubbed the people's car, the Trabant was supposed to replace the Volkswagen Beetle. How successful was that? Its designs and engineering were a serious afterthought. The list of problems for this car was endless. To start with, its body panels would fall off at high speeds. Even so, the Trabant left several body panels on the roadway. It also had a 2-stroke engine that sucked oil, like a vampire drinking blood. Now, the car didn't have any safety features at all, no turn signals, and no brake lights. 2002 to 2007 Saturn Ion. The Ion is quite yet another common player in the list of worst cars ever built. Despite showing promise at the start, America's answer to Toyota and Honda, Saturn desperately needed some refreshing, and they settled for the Ion. Unfortunately, the beginning of the Ion also was the beginning of the end. Saturn desperately needed some refreshing, and they settled for the Ion. Unfortunately, the beginning of the Ion was the beginning of the fall of Saturn, and the Ion didn't answer anything. Toyota and Honda continued bringing in their vehicles to the United States, and the car was plagued with poor build quality and a wretched interior and bad styling. But there was a no-haggle price. 1973 to 1981 Reliant Robin. The car is the butt of countless jokes. The Reliant Robin was missing more than a wheel and will be remembered as one of the worst cars ever. The Reliant Robin was a three-wheeled vehicle and borders on not even being a car at all. The Robin's basic formula had been the backbone of the Reliant car production since the company's founding in 1935. And this would be a hard pass for most drivers. Now, I know this is not the full list of the worst cars, and your worst car suggestions, you can put that down in the comment. This should be a good list, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. If you got value from this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We appreciate your comments, and I'm sure you've got more to add to the list. You can follow me on all forms of social media at Lauren Fix, where I'll also be answering your questions. Check out our website, Car Coach Reports in English and Spanish, and if you're still looking for some more car smarts, check out my book, Lauren Fix's Guide to Loving Your Car. The link is down below. I'm co-hosting a podcast called Total Car Score. It's available on all platforms where we go behind the scenes to see what makes the auto industry tick. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.